thanks so much for coming out, and welcome to the 5th year of the annual David James Poissant Endowed Prose Reading Series. As a reminder, please turn off or silence your cell phones and other electronics before we get started. We have one of these readings with the Poissant series every semester now, and I want to thank you for joining us for this spring semester with me and Stansel. So my name is Dr. Will Donnelly, and again, I want to thank you for coming out tonight. This reading series, the Poissant series, would not be possible without the generous support of people like you. Thank you to those who have donated to the series already. And for those who haven't, please consider speaking either to me or to Sandra Meek about making a donation to help keep the reading series going here at Berry College in the future. Remember, too, that tonight's author's books will be sold at the conclusion of our reading and question and answer session, and that he will be available to sign them in the rear of the chapel at that time, just outside those close the doors. We just have books out in the foyer there. Anytime I read Ian Stansel's fiction, I feel as if I'm immersed in a study of character. The people he describes care about each other, fight each other, tend to each other's needs, and sometimes hurt each other. But in their hearts of hearts, their primary directive is always rooted in love. In his most recent novel, The Last Cowboys of San Geronimo, a pair of brothers, Frank and Silas Van Boy, ride and train horses in northern California, and in a hot-blooded spirit of brotherly competition, they attack each other often, sometimes under cover of darkness. They brawl at bars over controversies as mundane as the wearing of a hat. They spend time in the county jail, and to them it's worth the trouble. One even sneaks mold into the other's horse's hay bales just to give his animals colic, even though most of the horses that end up falling ill don't belong to him. In all honesty, I'm not sure that I'd enjoy spending much time with the Van Boy brothers if they existed in real life. But in Ian Stansel's skillful hands, I can't bear to deprive myself from their company. I find that I enjoy tagging along on their adventures, good and bad. And that's a testament to what this kind of fiction can do. It presents to us humanity in all its painful, roughshod glory, yet when we face it, we find ourselves unable to look away. Ian Stansel is the author of the novel, The Last Cowboys of San Geronimo, and the short story collection, Everybody's Irish, a finalist for the Penn Robert W. Bingham Prize for Debut Fiction. His fiction and nonfiction have appeared in numerous venues such as Plowshares, Salon, Joyland, the Cincinnati Review, Poets and Writers, and elsewhere. He holds an MFA from the Iowa Writers Workshop and a PhD from the University of Houston, and he teaches currently in the Creative Writing Program at the University of Louisville. Please help me welcome Ian Stansel.
Hi, I'm going to maybe play with the mic a little bit to make sure you can hear me. How's it right now? That's what I thought. Okay.
Do you need help?
Awesome. How are we so far? Better? Not really. How's that? That's it? Okay. Thank you, Will, for that introduction, and thank you, Will, and everybody in the Creative Writing Program here, everybody in the English Department, everybody in the larger college for making this series possible and for allowing me to be a part of it. It's an honor to be here in this just like bonkers place on this really beautiful campus. It took me a while to get here today. There were some plane troubles. So after 12 hours of travel, I think I could have driven here quicker. This is a very nice welcome. This place on this campus and all you people really made it worth it. I'm going to at the start of a story, I would think. We've got just a little bit of background on the book. So we've got these two brothers, but really the main two characters are Silas Van Looy and his brother Frank's wife, Lena. As you'll see, I'll read the first chapter, and then I'll read maybe 3 other little sections, if time permits. And speaking of that, I will check the time. So the book alternates between following Silas and following Lena, and while it's doing that, it toggles back and forth between the present action of the book, which takes place over about 4 days, and the backstory, which takes place over about 30 so years. I'm not sure that you need to know anything else, so I'm going to start reading chapter 1, and as I jump forward, so here's all you need to know. If Frank is in the scene, it's the backstory, because he's dead in the present action, right? Which you'll hear about in a second. So if Frank's there, we're in the past. If Frank's not there, we're probably in the present and he's dead. Chapter 1. What are you doing, brother? These words clung to the gnarled oak of Silas's consciousness, climbing, nesting, making themselves at home. He set his bones in the driver's seat of his truck and shut the door. 50 yards away, his brother Frank lay dead in the dirt, a bullet buried in his chest. Clean heart shot. Silas always had been a hell of a marksman. But now his hands shook and his shoulders petrified and his legs went numb. He looked through the passenger window in the direction of Frank's body, but saw only the density of the forest and the darkness of the pre-dawn light. What are you doing, brother? After all these years, Frank was gone, put down, but for all the twisted relief, even joy Silas had expected based on the hundreds of fantasies he'd indulged in regarding this very occasion, he felt no lighter. It wasn't sadness or grief he felt, not regret either, but a deep and frightening nothingness. He kneaded his empty legs, tried to massage some life back into them. On the seat next to him were Frank's Marlboros. Silas picked up the pack, opened the lid, and inhaled the scent of tobacco. Nausea descended upon his gut. He flung open the door and vomited onto the ground, detonating a plume of dry dust. He went to the trailer hitched to the back of his truck. The horse inside whinnied at the sight of her rider out the window. She wanted to get out, and Silas was ready to oblige her. The back gate creaked open, and Silas set a hand on the horse's rump. "All right, girl," he managed. His stomach threatened to erupt again, but he held it off, taking deep breaths of the air in the trailer. This was the scent of his life, horsehair and manure and leather. He led the horse, a fine bay Hanoverian called Disco, out of the trailer, attacked her, and hoisted himself atop. He had bigger horses than this one, but Disco was bright and loyal. She'd never thrown him in the 3 years he'd been riding her, never once acted out on the lead or tied in the barn aisle. She didn't spook easily and seemed to enjoy a bit of adventure. She'd become his go-to for the annual hunts he put on, and she went up hills and over hedges with zeal, and this was just what he needed. Leaving the gate down, the driver's side door ajar, and his brother dead in a small clearing, he pressed his legs into the horse's flanks, and the rhythmic drumming of the horse's hooves on the ground made Silas feel something, a familiar jostling of his body at least. He would take it. A half hour later, he emerged from the woods at the south edge of his own property and took the horse down the dry creek bed, avoiding the town proper just in case any of his few neighbors were up at this odd hour. It wasn't unthinkable. Though residents in the area numbered only a couple hundred, they were an ambitious bunch, cyclists and runners, folks heading up to Point Reyes for the day or down into San Rafael or Sausalito or the city. He edged the south border of the reservoir and took the Indian Hill Road loop northward. At the uppermost finger of the reservoir, he dismounted and let his horse drink her fill. Silas unscrewed the lid of his thermos and drank 2 cups of coffee, black and still steaming in the moist morning. Silas took a moment to meditate on the beauty of the place. Persistent aroma of eucalyptus hung thickly in his nostrils. A wild peacock called from a nearby field. The grass on the hills all around him waved and reflected the sunrise light and shone persimmon orange. For the past 3 decades, Silas Van Looy had thought about little aside from horses, women, wine, and killing his brother Frank. In his hazy imaginings of this last occupation's aftermath, there was always more time for the first 3. He would kill Frank in whatever way his mind conceived of in that particular moment, and then continue on with his business, training the yearlings and greenhorns that ambled into his barn, giving lessons, taking students to shows, and then in the nighttime visiting local taverns and wine bars and working his cowboy charm on the women, perhaps getting a taker on an invitation back to his trailer. But now that Frank was gone, he realized his naivete. Other than the horse he rode, he would have little to do with these gorgeous beasts for the foreseeable future. In planning this ride, this getaway, he had come to understand how ill-equipped he was. He had tens of thousands of dollars, perhaps $100,000 worth of tack and equipment, but did he have saddlebags? Something so simple as saddlebags? He found a set, hard and dusty and cracked, a rare western stable in the English riding world of Marin County. They'd been unused for 30 years now. He recognized them as his father's and marveled how they'd managed to end up there in his tack room after all these decades, how he must have moved them himself without giving them a thought. He packed in a few t-shirts and underwear, an extra button-down, a spare pair of jeans, a toiletry set, and a farrier kit for such occasion as Disco's hooves might need a bit of tending. He rolled a sleeping bag and a pillow and strapped them to the back of the saddle. In addition to his coffee thermos, he carried a canteen of water and a leather wine quota he'd purchased two decades before in Basque country, and into which he had funneled a liter of wine for such occasion as he might need a bit of drowning. He finished his coffee and mounted Disco and continued north, emerging from the bowl of the reservoir, feeling exposed, unmoored in the absence of trees. Crossing Red Hill Road, he was startled by a car coming quick around a bend. It was light enough now, and the car was close enough that in the split second he could make out that the driver was a woman, a brunette. He wondered what she could see of him. He pressed Disco into a quicker trot and pulled his Stetson lower over his face and directed the horse into a dry brown channel between 2 hills. The road seemed to take on some significance, as if it were a borderline, the first of many, and now that he was past it, he was that much farther away from what his life had been. But Silas also knew that it was just a road, same as any other, and that he was only covering ground, even if he hadn't the foggiest notion of where he was going. Behind him, the sound of the car passed, and he was left in the shush of the wind purling over the grass. So I'm going to jump maybe a chapter forward and read a little bit of backstory. So one of the sort of projects of the book was to write a Western that wasn't a Western, right? To write a Western in a place that wasn't Utah or Wyoming or Texas, Montana. To write a Western in the sort of fancy area of Northern California. It's Marin County. For those of you who don't know, Marin County is the county just north of San Francisco. It's really like fancy schmancy, right? It's a pretty expensive place to live. I think for a while, there maybe in the 80s and 90s, it was the richest county in the, like per capita or something in the country. And so I wanted to challenge myself to see if I could do that, and to write a Western that takes place now, to see if a Western can actually even happen, you know, when people have cell phones and GPS and like baseball caps instead of cowboy hats, you know. But I'm going to jump a little bit back to their childhood. Silas and Frank were born 2 years apart, Frank the elder. Funny story with Frank, he didn't have a birth certificate until he was in his 20s. The kid was born in the back of a Ford pickup at the side of the road. Their father, Silas Sr., had been rushing his wife Virginia to the hospital. This was back in the early 1960s, and San Geronimo, where they lived, was about as remote then as the craggy tip of a mountain. But halfway down the hill into town, Virginia says, no, stop the truck. It's here now, here it comes. And Silas Sr., he tears over the shoulder and runs around and tosses this big old horse blanket over the bed and goes and pulls his wife out of the truck by her armpits and gets her somehow up on the blanket, and she's screaming bloody goddamn murder. And by the time he pulls off her undies and pushes her knees up, like he must have seen somewhere, the goddamn kid is crowning, and Silas Sr., he's thinking, oh Jesus, because one, what he's watching, and two, he's about to be a dad, and that whole complex of worry comes crashing in, and then suddenly Virginia is quiet except for these kind of extended groans and sad sighs, and he is in awe of her. How the hell does she know how to do this? And the head kind of pops through the opening, and Virginia says, get him, Silas, get him. And he does, and by God, it isn't him. And he's father to a son, and he wipes the kid's mouth out like his wife tells him, and the kid is crying. Holy mother of God, is this kid crying like Silas Sr. has never heard? Or so the story went. After a few minutes of dumbfounded silence, Silas Sr. says to his wife, you okay? And she pants, okay. And then, give him here. And Silas Sr. does, and it's only then that he remembers that they're on the side of the road. And so he says, let's go home. And Virginia, she just nods. Story continues. Frank was sitting Western before the year was out. Never went to a hospital. Parents never even gave a thought to registering their child with the federal government. No one asked for a birth certificate until the taxes on the property went in under his name. Frank loved this story. Told it at every opportunity. Thought it made him some kind of natural-born outlaw living outside the bounds of conventions and rules. Gave him what Silas Jr. always thought as an unearned swagger. Of course, through the first half of his life, Silas often benefited from his brother's ego. Silas never would have had the brass at 21 years old to take over the stable A to Z. But after a short, intense life of riding and drinking and smoking, their father was in failing health, and Frank showed no reservations about assuming control of the place. The old man sat on a bar stool in the sun just outside the south door to the barn, thinking on the notion a minute. And then he said, your grandfather gave me a big old bag of nothing, and I made this out of it. It ain't much, but it's better than what I got. He pulled on his lucky strike. I'll be gone soon enough, and I'll be gone sometime, and the whole shit show will go on regardless. So you two do what you want. Frank took the lead, and the boys instituted a plan to rehab the entire outfit. The elder brother reasoned that there was only so much money in Western riding, especially in this particular part of the world, so they would change modes, become English. Frank was gleeful about the notion, but for Silas Jr., this meant relearning to ride almost completely. This is coming natural to you? Silas asked him. Hell no. But neither is being broke. Watching these fuckers around here raking it in. Ain't no money in cowboying. Maybe in Pop's day, but not today, not around here. We ain't starving, Silas said. That's a pretty low bar, you said. Frank clicked the light on and off in the tack room, then said, Do you know how much folks will pay for a fancy horse to take to shows, or somebody in a white shirt to tell them to keep their heels down? Later that night, Frank tossed a copy of The Joy of Riding onto Silas's bed. He said, "These people don't know the likes of us, brother." The next day, Frank found Silas outside the arena painting jump holes. "I just got a loan on a horse today," Frank said. "An Oldenburg, 4 years, 10 grand. They're dropping her off tomorrow." Silas stood in awe of the words, the numbers, which seemed to linger between him and his brother like the smoke of Frank's cigarette. They'd never spent more than $500 on a horse. "Knew you'd say no," Frank said in response to the silence. "I also knew you'd come around eventually, and this deal couldn't wait for you to catch up." $10,000, Silas said. "Be worth double that when we're done with her," Frank said. As far as Silas was concerned, this was the end. His brother was a dreamer of big dreams, but reality was reality. Silas could hardly even conceive of $10,000. The next day, Frank put the Oldenburg in the barn's biggest stall, the one they used for birthing. Silas had to admit to her beauty, black as oil. Not the biggest horse, a bit under 16 hands, but powerful with huge hooves anchoring her body. When Frank brought her into the empty arena and let her loose, Silas saw her move and was won over, captivated. He'd never seen an animal move like that. Dancing she was. "Look at her," Silas said. "That's right," Frank said, hopping up and sitting on the fence next to his brother. "Look at her." They watched the horse for a good 10 minutes, watched her run and trot and kick, and when she got that out of her system, they watched her just stand there, sniffing at the ground, swishing her tail at flies. Silas wondered if this was anything like what other people felt like when they went to church. Frank broke the silence, said, "You telling me we can't sell this horse for 20 grand or more? A little training, get some discipline in her? Fuckers would be lying to them. We'll have our pick of buyers, and then we get another one and we sell it, and we train it and we sell it for a pile of money, and then we get another, and in the meantime people see what we can do breaking a horse, and they come to see what we can do teaching them to ride, and they start boarding her here, paying through the nose, and we build more, and buy more, and sell more, and train more, and that's how the hell this works, brother." So, I'm gonna jump ahead. So what happens is, as you already know, Silas shoots his brother, and heads out on horseback. That car that drove by Silas as he was making his getaway happened to be a friend of Lena, Frank's now widow. And they're talking, and this comes out. She says, "To think, I just saw it." And at that point, Lena realizes that Silas is indeed the one who killed her husband, and that he's making a getaway on a horse. And this being a Western, she's just got to go after him. So she does, and so she takes off, and she and Frank employed a young woman of about 22 years, and the young woman's name is Rain. It's known in California, so people are named Rain. And Rain realizes what she's doing, and so at this point they sort of meet up. Lena saw the trailer from 100 yards down Nicasio Valley Road, her trailer, parked at the side of the road across from Silas's spread. A strange and disorienting sensation seeing your own rig where it shouldn't be, outside your husband's murderer's property, no less. She steered Pepper, that's her horse, she steered Pepper to the gravel shoulder where his steps wouldn't resonate as much. A dun rump, high and muscular, and a black tail appeared in the shadow of the trailer. Lena knew the horse. Major, Rain's 6-year-old Danish warm blood. Lena came up to the truck slowly, warily, in case she was mistaken, though she knew she wasn't. She said, "What are you doing here?" Startled the girl. Rain angled her bony elbows out the window of the truck. "I figured this was where you'd start," she said. "I figured if I was wrong, I'd take Major back, no harm, no foul. But if I was right, then I just might join you." "What is it you think I'm doing, Rain?" "I saw the saddlebags in the tack room last night." She nodded toward the gear tied to Pepper's rump. "Those saddlebags." "I want back home," Lena told her. "You think he's making off on a horse, and I think you're right. You don't even know him." "But I know you," Rain said. "I know you wouldn't be out here unless you were certain. The thing I can't figure out is how you're going to find him. He could have gone anywhere." Lena unhooked her bottle from the saddlebags and took a long drink of water. She said, "Silas Van Looy is a coward and a drunk and a cheat, plus he's stupid to boot. That's how I'm going to find him." It felt somehow liberating to say this, and she had to tamp down the urge to repeat it again and again. "I'm going to find him. I'm going to find him." "So what will you do?" Rain said. "Rain, this isn't your concern. I can help. No, this isn't fun time. This isn't an adventure." "I've got my things," Rain said. "I've got a pack and food and water." She twisted into the dark of the truck cab, then returned holding something. She said, "And I've got this." Her hands opened like a tulip to reveal a small silver gun. "My father gave it to me when I moved out to the barn." "Plan on shooting someone, Rain?" "No." Then put it away. Rain folded a cloth around the gun. She said, "Look what else I have." She held up her phone, and the screen lit up, displaying all manner of colorful icons. She tapped at one, and a moment later, a muffled, nasy voice issued some kind of announcement. "It's a police scanner," she said. "On your phone? You can tune into different departments and listen in." Lena had to admit that this might be incredibly helpful. And given that the flip phone in her pocket, with its 2 wings hanging together by wires, was nearly 10 years old, she wouldn't have it without the girl. Rain said, "We can cover more ground together. 2 sets of eyes on the lookout." "The lookout," Lena said. She suddenly wanted to be anywhere but there on her horse having this conversation. She wanted to be in bed, half awake, Frank's warmth covering the short distance between them. What had been commonplace occurrences, those moments when she was smart enough to take notice of what she had, now those were fantasies. Frank was gone, and Lena felt more alone than she ever had. And this was why, despite the danger and her instinct to protect Rain, despite the voice inside her chiding for putting the girl in harm's way, she found herself pointing up Nicasio Valley Road, saying, "There's a turnoff where the trail riders park their rigs. Be ready by the time I get there." She pressed Pepper into a trot as Rain pulled off the shoulder. Major was out of the trailer intact when Lena caught up. The 2 women made their way north along a well-worn riding trail. The plan in Lena's head was to stop in the few towns nearby and ask around. She was half angry at Rain for wedging herself into the search, so she pointedly said nothing about where they were going. More, though, she was angry at herself for being so happy the girl was there with her. They moved at a lively trot through the morning sunlight, and on the downslopes, they picked up into a canter. There was a part of Lena's mind that, a few hours before, had believed that this was not only a chase, but an escape. The house where she'd returned from the hospital the day before was filled with Frank. The kitchen returned the faint smell of bacon he'd made that morning. The book he'd been reading the night before, a Dick Francis mystery, was splayed on his bedside table. He could never find a bookmark. Beard hairs clung to the upper rim of the bathroom sink. The clock in the kitchen seemed to be counting the moments he'd been gone. But if she thought it would be any different out in the open air astride Pepper, she'd been wrong. The air was his breath. The tree branches were his arms outstretched. The sound of rain riding behind her was not rain, but Frank, though it had been so long since they took a ride together on these hills. His absence surrounded her, crushed her, howled its thunderous silence. When it got to be too much, she urged her horse forward into a canter, but every step Pepper took merely stamped her husband's name into the earth. I wonder if maybe I have time for one more little section, if that makes sense. Too torturous. So we're gonna this last bit I'm gonna read is another flashback. So we get all three of these characters together, Frank and Lena and Silas, and this is a scene where they go on a fox hunt. They drove to Nicasio, to the stable that within 18 months would be Silas's, and unloaded their horses. Others were already there, nearly all in red coats and stark white shirts and black helmets, nearly all drinking from thermoses of coffee or from glasses of Bloody Marys being mixed on the back of a GMC pickup and chattering about last year's hunts. They weren't real hunts, of course. No actual foxes involved, but the scent had been laid in the hours prior, and they all hoped the trail would be long and a bit tricky, with good lengthy gaps between to challenge the hounds leading the way. On the far side of the meadow, where the huntsmen and huntswomen had stashed their trailers and now stood holding the horses' reins, the priest arrived, a black knit cap atop his head and white cassock dragging in the tall brown grass. Oh, I'm going to pause here. I forgot this. There's a word in this section, and I don't know how to pronounce it. And maybe somebody can help me out here. I think it's aspergillum. We're in a church. Somebody should know. It's the thing that a priest has when they shake the holy water. Is it aspergillum? I'm going to say aspergillum since you all don't know the difference, apparently. We'll get there. Might be wrong. I forgot where I was. Frank and Silas each downed a drink and got another. A man came around with a tray on which stood delicate glasses of port, and each of the boys took two. Since their father had passed nearly 2 years before, the brothers had taken to the bottle more and more often and more seriously in what looked like with less enjoyment. More often than she would have liked, Lena went to bed hours before Frank, and in the morning would find their supply of whiskey and beer significantly diminished. God knew what Silas was up to back in the old Van Looy homestead alone. It was when they were together, though, whether in a period of peace or war, that they drank with such abandon. They could be in a terrible argument over bills or schedules or plans for business, but neither would return from the kitchen or the bar without a drink for the other. Lena didn't fault them. Grief did things to a person, but it scared her each time she saw them passing the point of casual inebriation, such fuel for such fire. When everyone seemed sated, the hounds were released from their own trailer and gathered within a circle formed by the riders and horses and spectators. It is said, the priest began, pulling his cap from his head, that St. Hubert saw the sign of Christ while on a hunt. The cross was illuminated within the points of a buck's horn, and he was converted. This is why he is the patron saint of the hunt, and why we invoke his good name on occasions such as this. This morning, these are my parishioners. He motioned to the pack of rolling and playing and scuffling at his feet. And I can think of no better congregation. So we pray that the Lord keeps them safe and free of harm. We pray that they lead their masters true and keep them safe and free of harm. And while we're at it, we pray for the fox in spirit and absentia, fleet-footed, and as clever as her kind is known for. This is the blessing of the hounds, and may they be blessed indeed. He took in hand the aspergillum and shook the holy water onto the pack. Frank clanked his glass against Lena. "To the hounds," he said. "To the hounds," Lena said. Silas reached in. "The hounds." "Now," the priest continued, "if the riders will approach." And all of them, red and black-coated, created a formless mass like a checkerboard gone to chaos, and all removed their helmets and smoothed their hair and knelt before the priest, who hung around each neck a medallion of St. Hubert. After he'd garnished each rider, he said, "A good hunt to you, and a good day, and I will see you at the bar," which got a good generous chuckle and a hearty cheer. The huntsman sounded the horn, and the ride began with a leisurely trot, conversation and laughs. Lena and Frank and Silas knew nearly every one of the others from shows or their own barn stalls, and a good number of them made their way up to the front where the threesome rode and came alongside and bade them good morning. They crossed the creek and made the rise on the far side, the hounds leading the way, barking their music, frantic but focused fully on the scent. On the descent they ran, and the riders pressed their mounts into cantering, and the cold, wet morning air slicked their skin. The hilltoppers cut long ways, while Lena and Frank and Silas and the rest of the jumpers went straight at fences and hedges and walls, their horses leaping over, the whole pack of them led by the hounds, and the field master moving like a wave. Lena's body buzzed with caffeine and vodka and the thrill of the ride. For Lena, this was the high point of the year. This was Christmas 2 months early. Sweat dripped down her neck and chilled in the dewy wind. Her horse relished the sprint and the commotion and rode smoothly across the becrewed fields. Though Lena had lived in this area her whole life, it could still feel strange and beautiful, especially on mornings like this when the fog settled in from the coast and the air was filled with the pounding of hooves. It took just over 2 hours to follow the scent to its end. The riders cheered as the hounds circled and yelped furiously at the drag, tracked and found hanging from the branches of a wide, vulture-like oak. Lena and the boys started back with the group at a mild pace until Lena stole one more look around at the open fields. How often did she ride outside the arena, out here in nature? And then she broke off into a gallop across the meadow. Frank and Silas followed. Lena heard them behind her. She knew the rest of the riders were watching, smiling, and shaking their heads at those darn Van Looy boys, no taming them, even though she, Lena, for once led the pack. They rode up Indian Hill Road and finally cut west, and Lena took them all the way to the coast. Their horses lurched into the silky, hot sand of the dunes. The white and gray water burst against the land, and the sun flashed from behind a bank of coastal clouds. Frank said, "Damn right," and leapt from his ride, landed in the sand with a muffled impact. He absently handed his reins to Lena and marched forward to the water, fell backwards onto his ass and tugged off his boots. Britches pulled up just north of his knees. He waded into the froth. Lena and Silas smirked and watched, leaning forward on the pommels of their saddles. Lena luxuriated in the bracing salt breeze off the water. Silas said, "Do you ever think that we're farther west than the west?" Lena looked at him. He chewed at his bottom lip as if working out nerves, and it only then occurred to Lena that he might be anxious being alone with her. Frank was always right there keeping an eye on everything, but now, though they watched the elder brother there staring down at the water lapping at his ankles, they experienced an awkward intimacy. "Run that by me again?" she said. "Like, there's the West, and then past all that, there's California, or at least Marin." Lena said nothing, but she thought she might have understood him. He went on, "I've had people say I should be somewhere else, Wyoming or Colorado, real cowboy country. but I can't imagine being away from this. The coast? Lena said. I didn't know you felt any way about it. Shoo, Silas said. This is the place for me. You can dump my ashes here at high tide when I'm gone. Better yet, someplace north of here out in the wild, some little cove, shake me out of whatever can you all got me in and let me get eaten up by the fish a bit at a time. You'll do that for me? Me? Why, you, Frank? I ain't likely to have anyone willing. Oh, poor Silas, she said. Yeah, he said, for me. He watched the water and his brother dance in it. I come out here by myself and just look out there, he said. Just sit here for a while. By yourself, Lena said. Silas grinned into the wind. Yeah, sometimes I bring a friend. From your stable of ladies. I don't know about that. Lena said, yeah, I can just see it. Some young thing coming out here with you, not knowing she's about to fall victim to the Van Loy cowboy charm. Is that what happened with you and Frank? She said, something like that, I suppose. Silas smiled and said, woman, nobody's going to buy you as a victim. I stopped reading there, and thank you all very much for listening. So, Will, do we have time for any questions? If anybody has any questions. Yes?
So, what kind of horse
Say it once more, please.
what kind of book about horses?
This is I have an answer for this question. It's not a very funny answer. Maybe I'll have a funny answer to a different question. When I was growing up, my mom rode horses, and my sister rode horses, and my sister became a horse trainer, and I was writing a different book. I was writing what I thought would be like a big, it's going to be like a big World War II book, you know, and that was going to be my first novel. It's going to be like a big, fat first novel about World War II, and I was going to knock everybody's socks off. And then very, very suddenly, my sister passed away. And I didn't write for a few months. I was quite sad, devastated. And when I went to that big fat World War II book that was going to be so impressive, it just seemed really stupid. I just didn't, I couldn't even remember why I was writing it. The characters, I didn't understand the characters, I didn't understand what they were doing. Maybe it was just a bad book too, like, you know. And so I decided to just write about horses, and it wasn't supposed to be a novel, it was supposed to be like a novella. I had an idea to write 3 novellas and try to get those published together. And they were all going to be horse books, right? Horse novellas. There was going to be this Western, this like quasi-Western, and there was going to be a racetrack novella, and then a novella about wild Mustangs. And what happened was this one just started, it just grew and grew, and then it turned into a novel. Meanwhile, the other 2 turned into a short story and a screenplay, so I still never written a novella. My whole goal was to write something that my sister would have really liked. And she loved horses more than anything, so I wrote about horses. And I knew she would want it to be a sort of like fast-paced. I don't know if that sounded fast-paced to you. That's fast-paced for me. You know, my stories are pretty slow. But I wanted to write something with horses, and that really moved along. And I wasn't trying to impress anybody except maybe her. So that's why I'm writing this. Yeah. Yes?
Advice for when writing stories that hop around for a lot of people to feel information like that?
Yeah, so her question is advice about writing stories that move around in time. like as you'll notice, this one moves around from the present action to backstory. I guess my advice would, number one, be decide how the story is going to do that, or try to discover it as quickly as possible, and start doing that as soon as possible, as early as possible in the story. So with this, the book started really coming together when I realized what the structure was, that every chapter was going to switch off, focusing on Silas, then Lena, then Silas, then Lena. And within that, each chapter was going to have a backstory and present. And I think I'd cheat a couple of times and have a couple of chapters that are just the present action. But once I realized that, I still didn't know what the story was, totally, but I knew the shape of it, and that gave me something. You know what I mean? It gave me a sort of vessel to kind of pour the story into. So, I mean, for instance, you know, on the first page, you find out that Silas has just shot his brother. It was nerve-wracking because I was about 3/4 of the way through the book and I still didn't know why. And I was like, I mean, everything's going to hinge on this, right? I better find out why he did this, and it better, like, work. But I got that far not knowing, probably because I knew how the book would move, right? So that's how I did it here, and I was just really strict about it. And a lot of short stories do that, right? A lot of short stories take that structure where you have that very small or short present, and then a longer backstory. So one really recent example that I just taught in one of my classes is the first story in a story collection called Friday Black, which is garnering a lot of praise and awards by the author Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah, and it does that exact thing, right? The present action takes place over a few hours, and the backstory takes place over a couple of months. You know, it's a really solid structure to use. I mean, I managed to write a book using that, and it's really simple. You know, there's no real tricks to it. Yes. Reading the book aloud, does it make me realize I would have changed things? Does it make me second guess? I'm sorry, I'm just making sure. Reading it aloud is a weird experience. So yeah, like if anyone were like sitting there with the book and reading it along, you might be like, that's not that word, right? Because I am changing things, or like I cut out some curse words. You do notice things when you read it aloud, right? Repetition of certain words, right? Like I have a lot of characters say "God damn," right? Sorry, but like probably I could have cut a quarter of the "goddams" from the book. You know what I mean? But you're reading it so slowly, but then when you read it out loud, you're like, oh man, I just said "goddamn" for the 5th time. So you do notice things like that, and. I read it out loud before it got published. You know, when you publish something, you read it over and over and over and over again, and you're going through it with an editor and a copy editor, and they're questioning every 3rd word. Somehow they didn't ask me to cut out some of those goddams, but yeah, sure, I would, hindsight, 2020, all that. Yeah, I would probably change some things. But not a lot, just wording, something that seemed good on the page, and then when your tongue tries to make its way across that, string of words, you're like, oh, that's really quite awkward, or that's some silly wordplay or something like that. You try not to think about it, because you can't do anything about it. If you're a musician, you can't, because you're like doing songs live, and you get sick of it, so you just change it up. Like you're like Sting, you start doing everything jazzy or something. The older people laugh. Anything else, sir?
Yeah, I was curious about the conversation between Frank and Lena at the end, and he says something like, I feel like we're farther than west now. And it definitely feels like that out in the Bay Area on the Pacific Rim, but what I felt is like you've gone east. The people in the British writing, the English style writing and stuff. And so it reminds me of those westerns where the cowboy has found himself back east somehow.
Yeah,
I don't know if you had to
absolutely.
do that. And what do you think he meant when he said that?
I think it's just, I think they fancy themselves cowboys. And there's a part of the book where Lena's mother says to her, well, surely you can see that this is a performance that they put on with their belt buckles and their Stetsons, and they're getting drunk and fighting in bars and all that. All of that, it differentiates themselves from everyone around, you know, because everyone's not doing those things. And so I think he is in a moment where he's kind of questioning his performance. And as he's getting older, this cowboy shtick is getting sort of less interesting, and that's why, you know, instead of drinking whiskey, he drinks red wine. You know what I mean? And so he's trying to, I think in that moment, he's trying to figure out what this is, this place, and this culture that he lives in, and what is his place in it, given that he's been sort of playing this cowboy role his entire life, right? That's about as best as I can figure it out. My agent really wanted me to call the book West of West, and I was like, there's got to be a book called that. There's a three. And I was like, yeah. There's another question.
Yeah, when someone introduces you as writing a Western or a cowboy book, it seems like you're navigating Cormac McCarthy and especially Sam Shepard and Brothers.
Yeah.
And I was recently reading a review of the novel True West.
True West, yeah.
Broadway.
It's fantastic.
With Ethan Hawke. But are you introducing the feminine? Because that review talks about the stark masculinity that Shepard embodied in his plays.
Yeah, absolutely. So the question for those of you who couldn't hear is about the influence of, say, Cormac McCarthy, which of course is there, Sam Shepard, and the gentleman asked specifically about Sam Shepard's play True West, which is a great play, and definitely an influence on that, because it is Western-y, but they're in sort of the suburbs, aren't they, in that play, if I remember correctly. So that's sort of pushing at conceptions of the West in the same way that maybe this book is doing a little bit. But as far as introducing the feminine, that was very, very conscious. I found myself writing a book about feuding brothers, like drunk feuding brothers on horseback, and I was like, I feel like we've read this before. I feel like there's a couple hundred books just like this, right? And given that, I was really writing in memory of my sister. It was important to me to have a strong female co-protagonist, right? And it's like sort of classic Western story. It's the chase, right? It's, that's true grit, whatever. But I wanted the sheriff, right, to be a woman, and a woman, who's in the midst of middle age, and I wanted her to be like pretty badass, right? And that she has a younger woman as her sort of trusty sidekick. That was important to me too, because I wanted to show moments of them bonding and talking talking about things that weren't men, right? What is the test? Bechdel, right? Another word I don't know how to pronounce. The Bechdel test, if you've ever heard of this, is sort of like, it's like looking at the female character, how many female characters are in this book or movie or whatever, and what percentage of the time are they talking about men, right? So that was very much in my mind, even though she's grieving the loss of her husband, and even though their goal is to catch a man, I did want to fit in moments where they're just talking about sort of life and talking about the world, and yeah, Westerns should have more women, right? They were there, they're still there, right? Yeah, so thanks, it's a good question, because that was very much on my mind. Any other questions? Might want to stay remote. Yes?
So this is kind of a Barry tradition, so you'll have to forgive us for this. But whenever we have a reader come to the campus, we have this question that we ask them. And this tradition started when Jericho Brown, a poet, came to campus and read. He got really excited about this, so we just continue to do it. But you don't have to have any opinion. However, what are your opinions on Beyonce?
I'm going to preface my answer with, there's a literary journal that some friends / former classmates of mine started. It's called Barrel House. And Barrel House, they're a bunch of goofballs, right? And they don't want to be a sort of stuffy literary journal. And so they have an interview in every issue. And sometimes it's a writer, sometimes it's someone else, like Ian McKay from Fugazi or Emmylou Harris. And they've gotten some pretty big names to do these interviews. And the last question is always, what's your favorite Patrick Swayze movie? And Ian McKay, do you know the band Fugazi? It's like this old hardcore band. Not humorless, but not hilarious. And his question was, I don't give a fuck. Most like get into the spirit of the thing a little bit. And I did an interview for them, and I interviewed this filmmaker, Hal Hartley, who's he's a little independent filmmaker, and I love his stuff so much. Like I've been a fan of his. At that point, like 15 years, I've been really watching his films, like studying them, and I'm interviewing him, and he's like, okay, anything else? And I was like, yeah, one more. What's your favorite Patrick Swayze movie? And he was totally cool. He was just like, oh, he was really good in Donnie Darko. And I was like, oh, he was really good. Right? So he totally answered it. So my opinion of Beyonce. High. I mean, my opinion of her is high. You know, she's fantastic. You're putting me on the spot. I didn't expect this question. No matter how many times I get this question, it always surprises me. Crazy in Love is a great song, right? It's got that great chord line. Single Ladies. I'm sorry that I don't know more of the recent ones, though I did watch the Lemonade film, which is amazing, right? And I was going to buy it on vinyl for my wife, and she was really into it. It was like $40 or something. I was like, all right, we'll just watch it again. So my opinion of Beyonce is high. You know, that's one, like, Jay-Z's great, but like, Beyonce, you know, she's definitely like leading that couple, you know. Is that, are there any other questions? Anybody